Secretary of State Hillary Clinton has her way. A senior administration source tells CNN that Clinton is preparing to send a notice to State Department employees. The notice calls the present policy unfair and says it must end. Clinton wants same-sex partners of diplomats to get the training, benefits, allowances, and protections already given to heterosexual partners. But the source says the proposed change is not a done deal and an agency review is required. Recognizing gays in the diplomatic corps might be just the beginning. Gay rights activists believe this could be the best time to push their agenda forward, including getting rid of the military's don't ask, don't tell policy. On the campaign trail, he promised to fight for gay rights.
Those are the kinds of basic rights that I think everybody should enjoy.
Do those rights include serving openly in the U.S. military?
What do we want? The freedom to serve. And when do we want it? Now!
At this rally in Washington, pressure on the president to do away with Don't Ask, Don't Tell, which bars gays from openly serving in the military.
So I had the opportunity to serve for 13 years as an open lesbian in the military, and I can tell you, the entire military did not come crippling down to its knees by my mere presence.
I just had a meeting.
President Obama says he plans to repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Richard Socarides advised President Clinton on gay and lesbian issues.
I think the polling now suggests that the majority of Americans favor letting openly gay people serve in the military.
The last CNN poll showed 4 out of 5 people wanted Don't Ask, Don't Tell scrapped. Tony Perkins with the Family Research Council is unmoved.
I think they see the military as an organization that's there to defend our nation and defend our ideals. It's not a place of social experimentation.
But the gay rights issue goes far beyond the military. 2 federal judges in California say employees of their court are entitled to health benefits for their same-sex partners. But a branch of the federal government said no, citing the 1996 Defense of Marriage Act, which defines a spouse as someone of the opposite sex. If you were advising President Obama, what would you tell him today?
I think that now is a very good time to tackle some of the more controversial issues. People are somewhat distracted, and quite frankly, I don't think we're going to have a big debate about that now while we're trying to find ways to solve the economic crisis that we're in.
While in the Senate, Mr. Obama sponsored legislation to provide health benefits to same-sex partners of federal employees. And the White House says he supports repeal of the Defense of Marriage Act. But conservatives say he'll alienate a lot of people if he moves on this issue now.
His mandate was to address the economy. And as he goes off and is sidetracked into these controversial social issues, I think 2 things happen. 1, he takes his eye off the ball of the economy, slowing down the economic recovery. And 2, he loses the support of the American people.
An estimated 12,000 servicemen and women have been dismissed from the military under the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. Let's talk about the same-sex partner benefits for U.S. diplomats that's being proposed. Right now, domestic partners aren't covered by their partner's health insurance. They can't apply early for jobs at embassies like heterosexual spouses can. How big a deal would this be?
Thank you for having me on this afternoon. Absolutely, this is a major problem that the United States government is having in terms of dealing with its employees. National companies, Fortune 500 CEOs and organizations know that staying competitive with issues such as employment non-discrimination and extending these benefits to same-sex partners is key to keeping good and talented employees with you. And that extends into the United States federal government. This is a huge issue, not just because it's an employment situation, but because it's a life situation. And President Obama has already stated that, you know, these are civil rights issues. We're waiting for him to basically repeal the Defense of Marriage Act because of the fact that it makes it impossible for the federal government, from the Department of Agriculture all the way to the foreign service sectors, to be able to extend these types of benefits that are given to heterosexual couples to partners of the same gender.
But now this does require an interagency review before this can happen at the State Department. But if it does happen for U.S. diplomats, wouldn't this open the floodgates for same-sex benefits for everyone else? Why just U.S. diplomats? Wouldn't there be an outcry for equality across the board here?
Absolutely, and that's the problem here. Why doesn't President Obama fulfill his promise to the gay and lesbian Americans that voted for him, along with all Americans who are concerned about keeping the best talent working for our government and just repeal the Defense of Marriage Act. That's what he promised to do, and this whole problem would go away if he just fulfilled his promises.
So this seems like a real tricky situation here. If the State Department makes an exception to the Defense of Marriage law here, which defines marriage as a man and a woman, if the federal government approves that here, then what happens to the fight for same-sex marriage across the country? On Tuesday, we're probably going to learn about Proposition 8, the ban on same-sex marriage in California. We're going to learn if that's upheld by the state Supreme Court. It just seems everyone may not exactly be on the same page here.
I hate to have to say it, but these days it's all gay all the time. And really what this boils down to is a further discussion in America about gay and lesbian civil rights, basic human rights, and rights to us guaranteed under the American Constitution, under the pretense of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This is just continuing that conversation. California is absolutely going to be a firestorm here in a few days on Tuesday when the ruling comes out on Prop 8, continuing to have the discussion in America over civil rights for gay and lesbians. And again, the Defense of Marriage Act and the prohibition of the federal government for recognizing same-sex relationships when it comes to benefits of these, it's an extension of the same argument. I
have to ask, what happens to the 18,000 marriages that were performed before the Prop 8 ban went into effect in California? Do those people have any rights if the ban is upheld?
We don't really know, and that's something that the court is going to address. We're hopeful that the Supreme Court of the state of California is going to rule on the behalf of gay and lesbians here in California and repeal Proposition 8. And if they do end up upholding Proposition 8, they will also be ruling on those 18,000 couples who did end up getting married. We are hopeful that even if the Supreme Court justices keep Proposition 8 enforced, that those 18,000 couples will still be able to stay legally married in the state of California.
All right, Charles Moran, thank you for your time.
Ask, don't tell policy. As you know, 2 members of the armed forces have on this show come out publicly about being fired from the military for being gay. First Lieutenant Dan Choi is a West Point grad, an infantryman, and Iraq combat veteran who's fluent in Arabic. The Army has notified him he's being dismissed from the National Guard. Lieutenant Colonel Victor Fehrenbach is an F-15 fighter pilot, an 18-year veteran of the Air Force who has served in both Iraq and Afghanistan. He's been decorated for heroism in combat. The Air Force has notified him that his career is being ended as well. Both men are fighting to stay in the military, but as long as the Obama administration continues to implement the don't ask, don't tell policy that the president says he's against, the careers of both of these officers are effectively over. The military will have lost them forever. The investment in their training will be a loss. Both will become civilians, despite their skills and their desire to redeploy. Today at the White House press briefing, Air America's Anna Marie Cox, a friend of this show who's on deck to join us tomorrow, asked the White House spokesman about Don't Ask, Don't Tell.
This isn't about Gitmo, but it is about national security. Recently, 3 officers, West Point graduate Lieutenant Dan Choi, Air Force pilot Lieutenant Colonel Victor Fehrenbach, and Army Second Lieutenant Sandy Tsao, were all dismissed under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And is their dismissal a part of his national security strategy, or is their dismissal itself a threat to national security?
No, as I've said, I think when I was asked about these individuals, I think it may have been last week, I said that the president agreed that and said during the campaign and agreed with former members of the Joint Chiefs of Staff that the policy wasn't working for our national interests, that he committed to change that policy, that he's working with the Secretary of Defense and the Joint Chiefs on making that happen, and that the only durable way to do that is to go through Congress, and that's what the president intends to do.
That part where Mr. Gibbs says the president is working with the Secretary of Defense and the Joint Chiefs on making that happen to change the policy. The Pentagon spokesman said just yesterday that that's not actually happening, that there is no planning underway. There's no work underway inside the Pentagon toward changing the policy, despite the fact that the White House keeps saying that there is. Just as a programming note, good on Anna Marie for asking that very tough question.
We all want an America defined by deep and meaningful equality, from civil rights to labor rights, from women's rights to gay rights, from ending discrimination. There are no acceptable limits and there are no acceptable prejudices in the 21st century in our country.
We have a common task and a common challenge.
Why can't we see that we are all in this together?
18 million of you from all walks of life. Women and men, young and old, Latino and Asian, African American and Caucasian, rich, poor and middle class, gay and straight, you have stood with me. And I will continue to stand strong with you every time, every place, and every way that I can. The dreams we share are worth fighting for.